On the last morning of September, with 4 carriages standing on the gravel and the whole household drawn up behind him, the Duke of Camber came out of his own front door and stopped on the top step because there was a woman kneeling on it with a pail. She had her sleeves turned back to the elbow and her hands red from the water, and she did not get up, because she had been told 100 times that a maid at the front of the house gets up for nobody. She only goes quietly away. Behind him, the trustee in the grey coat was still speaking about Dorset and about £6,000 and about what a man in his position owed to the name he carried. "My father told me I might marry whoever I liked," the Duke said. "He said it in front of you. You wrote it down." "He was very ill, Your Grace." "He was perfectly clear." The Duke came down 1 step, which put him level with nobody, and looked at the woman on the stone. "Hester," he said, and then stopped, having got no further than her name, which was in any case not the name she had given when she came. That was the end of September. She had walked up that same drive in April with everything she owned in a canvas bundle, and the beeches only half out, and the gravel still soft from the winter carting. Camber Hall stood at the top of the rise with its face to the south, 17 bays of it, built in the year 1712 out of stone, got half a mile from where it stood. There was a chapel at the east end with a slipped voussoir in the arch over its door. There was a terrace along the south front with a stone balustrade running the length of it, and a gap in that balustrade, 11 feet long, where nothing had stood for 4 years. There were 2 gate piers at the bottom of the drive with carved finials on them that some said were pineapples and some said were fir cones, and no living person could settle it. There was a mason's yard behind the stable block, with a banker bench in it, and a shed, and a lime pit gone dry. And there was a quarry 3/4 of a mile away up the north track, which had given every stone in the house and had stood shut since March with dock and willow herb growing over its road. Mr. Vane, the house steward, took her in the still room passage and looked at her hands rather than her face. "Reed," he said. "Hester Reed." "Yes, sir." "Where before?" 2 years at a farm at Wickenby, before that with my father." "What was your father?" "Dead," she said, which was true and was not an answer, and Mr. Vane wrote something in his book and did not press it, because it was April and he was 3 women short and the wet had got into the north passage. £8 the year. You will be up at 5. The front steps are done before 6 every morning, soda and sharp sand scoured white, and if I can see a mark on them from the bottom of the drive, you will do them again." Hester put her bundle down on the flags. "I will do anything in this house you set me to," she said. "Fires, coppers, floors, the passages, the offices, anything. I will not put sand on that step." Mr. Vane's pen stopped. In 11 years, nobody had said such a thing to him, and he had no drawer to put it in. "You will not," he said. "No, sir. It is scoured white because it has been scoured white since before either of us was born." "Yes, sir. That is why there is a hollow in it you could lay your arm in." She said it without heat, the way a person says the day of the week. "Water and a bristle brush. Nothing else on that step. That is my condition, sir, and if it will not do, I will go back down the drive, and there is no harm done to anybody." He should have sent her down the drive. He often said afterwards that he did not know why he had not, but he did know. It was 5 o'clock, and the woman had walked 11 miles, and she had said her one impossible thing as calmly as if she were handing over a parcel, and there is something in a person like that which makes a tired man want to see what happens next. "Water," he said, "and if there is a mark, it is on your head." "It will be on my head," said Hester, and went to find the pail. So she was on the top step at 10 minutes to 6 the next morning, and every morning after, with a wooden pail and a hog bristle brush and no sand, and she worked the way her father had taught her, along the grain and never across it, wetting the stone first and letting it stand while she did the second step, so that the dirt lifted of itself and did not have to be taken off with the face of the stone as well. It took her longer than sand would have taken. Nobody noticed for a fortnight. Then the housemaids began to notice. because the step went a colour they had not seen on it, a warm buff gold when the water was on it, with little coiled shells in it, no bigger than a grain of wheat, hundreds of them, lying all through the stone like seed in a loaf. "That was always there," said Sarah Pyle, who did the laundry, standing over her with a basket on her hip. "Since before there was a house," said Hester. "It is Kelsey stone. It was the bottom of a sea. Those are all little creatures that died in the mud. Get away. Wet the coping on the terrace, and you will find them there too if the coping is Kelsey. Most of it is." "And the new work?" said Sarah, jerking her chin along the front where Mr. Rowe's men had the scaffold up on the south face and had been at the pointing since the thaw. Hester looked at the new work for what was, by her own reckoning afterwards, the last honest and untroubled minute of that spring. Then she said, "I have not looked at the new work," and went on with the second step, and that was the first lie she told at Camberhall, and it was not the worst one. She had looked at the new work in her first week. She had come round the corner of the south front on an errand with a can of hot water, and she had stopped in front of the scaffold the way another woman might stop in front of a horse gone lame, because the thing was so plain to her that for a moment she assumed everybody could see it. The joints were being pointed in Roman cement. She could tell it at 4 yards by the colour, a dead blue-grey against the buff of the stone, and she could tell it closer by the way it stood proud of the face, with a little weathered ridge on it, hard as a plate, where lime would have been flush and would have been soft enough to take a thumbnail. And the whole doctrine of her father's trade, said to her so many times over the banker bench that she had grown tired of hearing it, was that the mortar is put in to be the weak thing. The mortar is the sacrifice. Water comes into a wall because water always comes into a wall, and it must be let out again through the joint, and the joint frets and crumbles and is renewed in 50 years by a man with a bucket, and the stone stands for 400. Put cement in the joint, and the water cannot go out through the joint, so it goes out through the stone. The stone becomes the sacrifice, and it does not last 400 years. It lasts about 12. And it goes at the edges first, powdering, so that every block begins to look as though it had been gnawed. Under the scaffold there was a fine buff dust lying along the base of the wall like spilt flour. That was the wall coming down in the only way a wall like that ever comes down, which is slowly, and in front of everybody. And there was the other thing, which she saw in the same minute and understood better than the first. The new stone in the plinth was not Kelsey stone. It had no shells in it, and it had been set with its bed standing on end. Stone comes out of the ground in layers, laid down flat over a length of time that has no meaning to anybody, and the rule is as old as building. You set it in the wall the way it lay in the hill, on its natural bed. Set it on edge, face-bedded, and every one of those layers is standing vertical behind the face, and the wet gets in along them, and in 5 years or 10 the face comes away in sheets, like the leaves of a book left in a ditch. No mason does that by accident. A man does it because the stone he has bought comes out of the pit in beds too thin to give him the depth he needs. And turning it on edge is the only way to make a shallow slab into a deep-looking block. Hester stood with the hot water going cold in the can, and did the arithmetic that anybody's daughter would have done, and the arithmetic came out like this. If the wrong stone is here, somebody bought it. If the estate's own quarry is shut and grown over, somebody stopped it. And if a man is buying cheap stone 12 miles off and pointing it in cement to hide how it sits, he is being paid for something else entirely. Then she thought of her own name, which was Verrill, and of the wire bridge, which had come down 4 years since with 4 men on it, and of what the county had decided about Jonas Verrill without ever putting him in front of a judge to say otherwise, and of what would happen to a housemaid called Verrill who walked into a duke's steward's room to make an accusation about stone. She took the hot water upstairs. She said nothing in April, and she said nothing in May. In June, they turned off Edmund Kerry. He had been the estate mason since he was 14, and his father had been it before him, and he was 61, and his hands were so wrecked with lime and cold and 40 years of grit that he could not any longer hold a pencil, though he could still hold a boaster and hit it true. He had been to Mr. Rowe about the Sladestone in March. He had been to him twice more in April. He had said in front of 2 of Rowe's men that the plinth was face-bedded and that a boy of 12 could see it. What was said about him afterwards was that Kerry was old, that Kerry was slow, that Kerry had let the chapel arch slip and never told anybody, and that Kerry had been found at 11 in the morning sitting in the yard doing nothing at all, which was true because his hands had gone dead again and he had been waiting for them to come back. Hester carried the tea things through the steward's passage on the morning Rowe said it and heard it, and set the tray down in the pantry and stood with her palms flat on the shelf. She could have gone in. She has never once, in all the years since, allowed anybody to tell her that she could not. She would have had to say, "I know what face-bedding is because I was raised on a banker bench. My name is not Reed. My father was Jonas Farrell, whom you have heard of." And then she would have been out of the house by noon, with nothing proved, and Kerry turned off anyway. So she picked the tray up again and took it in and poured for Mr. Rowe, who thanked her civilly because he was a civil man, and Kerry went out of the yard at the end of that week, with his tools on a handcart and his cottage given to a carter's family by Michaelmas. That was June. And in August, when the ground was so dry that the grass on the terrace crunched and the river below the park had gone down to a green thread, the Duke of Camber sent for the housemaid who would not scour the front step. He had been in the house all that time, and she had seen him perhaps 9 times, and never within 20 feet. He was 34, and he had been Duke for 2 years and a half. He rode out early and came back before the house was properly up. He dined alone or with Mr. Rowe. He went from the north door to the stables, and from the stables to the north door, and in the whole of that spring and summer he did not once walk the terrace along the south front, which was the finest walk in 3 counties, and which had a gap 11 feet long in its balustrade. He signed everything Mr. Rowe put in front of him, and he signed it without reading it, and the household had long ago stopped remarking on this, in the way a household stops remarking on a shut door at the end of a passage. "Read," said Mr. Vane at 7:30 in the morning, "the library, now, and wipe your hands." The library was on the south side, and the shutters were folded back, and the Duke was standing at the end of the room with his back to the window, so that for a moment she could not see his face at all. "You are the woman who refuses the sand," he said. "Yes, Your Grace. Mr. Rowe tells me the front steps of this house have not been white since April." "They have not, Your Grace, and you have an argument." "I have a reason," said Hester. "It is not an argument, because there is nothing to argue about. May I say it plainly? I should be obliged. Sharp sand is a file, Your Grace. It is exactly what a mason uses to rub a face down when he wants stone taken off. Put it on a step every morning with a hard brush and a woman's weight behind it, and you are dressing that step. You are cutting it away in a fine dust and washing the dust into the gravel. The top step of this house has a hollow in it, 1.25 inches deep at the middle. Feet did some of that in 130 years. The rest is us." There was a silence of some length. 1.25 inches. He said. "I put a straight edge on it and measured it with a folded card, Your Grace, and I can show you." "Who taught you to measure a step with a folded card?" "A man who is dead," said Hester. He turned then and came a little way down the room, and she saw that he was younger than she had thought, and that he had the look of a man who sleeps badly and has stopped mentioning it. "Do as you like with the steps," he said. "Tell Vane I said so. Is there anything else in this house you have opinions about?" "A great deal, Your Grace." "I have no doubt of it," said the Duke, and that was the whole of the first time they were alone in a room together, and it took 4 minutes. Mr. Vane came out to her on the step that same evening, when the light was going yellow along the front, and the stone had that colour it only has in August, and stood at the bottom holding the household order book against his chest like a man holding his hat. "He says it is your affair now," he said. "So he told me, sir." "You might have said something to me in April." Vane shifted his feet. "About the file, the sand being a file. I have had sharp sand carted here every quarter for 11 years. 11 years, Reed. 6 shillings the load." "You had it because it was on the order before you," said Hester, "and it was on the order before that. It is on every order in every house in the county." "That is not a comfort." "No, sir. I did not mean it as one. I meant that a man cannot see a thing nobody has ever told him to look at." She wrung the cloth out into the pail. "You could take it off the order." "I have taken it off the order," said Mr. Vane, with dignity, and stood there a moment longer, and then said, not looking at her, "Yellow soap and lukewarm water on the hall flags. Would that be your view?" "Cold water, sir, and never a drop of soda near the black marble." "Cold," said Mr. Vane, and wrote it down, and went in. She found Edmund Carey in the mason's yard on a Sunday, sitting on the banker bench in the sun with his hands lying in his lap the way a man lays down 2 tools he has finished with. "You are the step-woman," he said. "I am." "They talk about you in the bell." He looked at her sideways. "You handle a brush like somebody's daughter. I might sit down. It is not my yard. I am turned off. Sit where you please." She sat, and for a while neither of them said anything, and the wasps went over the water butt, and the shut quarry road lay up the hill with the willow herb going to seed on it. "How long since anything came out of Kelsey?" she said. "March 12th. There is 40 year of stone in that hill yet." Carey moved one hand into the other. "I cut the coping for that terrace out of Kelsey when I was 19, 22 foot of it in 1 week, and I could not lift my arms of a Sunday." "And the balustrade?" "Ah," said Carey. The wasps went on. "Down at the house somebody was beating a carpet." "You will hear it wrong from the servants' hall," he said at last, "so you may as well have it right. 4 year ago, come November, Mr. Henry Ferrars wrote to his Grace from London. Ferrars was his friend, 42-year-old. They were at school together. He was in this house half the year. He wrote that the balustrade on the south terrace was moving. He had put his shoulder to it in the summer and felt it go. He wrote in September, and he wrote again in October. And his Grace was in Scotland, and he did not answer, and when he came home in November he did not send for me. He sent for a plasterer from Malton, and he had the cracks in the terrace stopped and painted over, so that they should not show." Carey's voice did not change at all. His father, the old Duke, had told him 50 times that this house was sound, and that any man who said otherwise wanted his money. He was a great man for the house being sound. He is in the chapel now with a stone over him, and the stone is Kelsey, and it will outlast every word he ever said. Hester found she was holding the edge of the bench. "Tell me the rest." "On the 6th of December there was a wind, and 11 foot of that balustrade went over into the gravel walk, and Mr. Ferrars was under it. He was on the terrace at 3:30 in the afternoon, looking at the very thing he had written about. It killed him where he stood." Carey sniffed. "It would have come down whatever anybody did in the end. It was face-bedded when it was set, in 1712, by men who knew no better and are all in the ground. That is a true thing, and I have said it to him twice, and it went into him like water into a jug that is already full." "He had 6 weeks, said Hester. "He had 6 weeks, Carey agreed, "and a letter in his own hand asking him to come, and he did not come. That is what he keeps. You will not shift it." He got up slowly and stood looking at the house. "He has not walked that terrace since. He will not be told the state of anything. Rowe brings him paper, and he signs it, and it goes away, and that is how it has been for 4 years. And if you want to know how a house like this gets eaten, that is how, not by wickedness, by a man who cannot bear to be told." That night she found something on the step when she came out with her pail in the dark, a folded sack doubled twice, laid on the second stair where a woman's knees would go, and a new brush beside it, hog bristle, the good kind, 3 shillings if it was a penny. Nobody said anything about it. She used the sack and washed it on Saturdays, and it was there again every night, and after a while she stopped looking round to see who had put it there, because she had worked out who, and she knew better than to spoil it. They met on the terrace at the end of that week, which neither of them had planned. She had gone along the south front at 9 in the evening because the light was gone and nobody would see her, and she wanted to put her hand flat on the wall and feel whether the heat was coming out of it. He had come up the steps from the gravel walk at the far end, having, she understood later, walked that end of the terrace for the first time in 4 years and got as far as the 7th bay. "Read," he said. "Your Grace. You are feeling my house. The stone holds the day's heat and gives it back at night," she said. "If a piece gives it back quicker than the pieces either side, there is a wet in it. You can find a fault in the dark with the flat of your hand quicker than you can find it at noon with your eyes." "And is there a wet in it?" Hester took her hand off the wall. "There is a wet in it, Your Grace." He was quiet for long enough that she heard an owl go over the park. "My father used to bring me out here after dinner," he said, "and make me say the names of the counties. He was very fond of this front. He said his grandfather had built it out of the hill it stands on, and that it would see us all out." "It will see us all out," said Hester, "if it is let alone by the right people. That is a strange sentence." "It is the only kind I have," she said, and he laughed. One breath of a laugh, gone at once, the sound of a thing badly out of practice. "Where did you learn stone?" "From my father, Your Grace." "Who was a mason?" "Who is dead," said Hester, and heard how it sounded and did not mend it. He did not press her. He looked at the wall for a while, and then at the 11 feet of terrace where nothing stood, and then he said good night and went in by the door at the far end. And Hester stood in the dark with her heart going like a bird in a box and told herself, quite firmly, that it was the walk. There was a Thursday in the middle of August when nothing happened. She was on the top step at 6 with the sun already hot, and she heard boots on the gravel, and the Duke came round the corner of the house from the stables with his coat over his arm. "That is a fir cone," he said, without any preamble at all. Hester sat back on her heels. "Where?" "On the gate pier. Both gate piers. My aunt said pineapple for 30 years, and my father said fir cone, and neither of them would give way, and the argument outlived them both." He came up 2 steps and sat down on the one above her, a duke sitting on his own front stair at 6 in the morning with a wet step between them. "It is a fir cone. It has scales. A pineapple has scales. It has a point at the top. So has a pineapple. It has no leaves at the top," said the Duke, with the air of a man producing a trump. "It had leaves," said Hester. "There is a break at the crown of it, and about 4 inches of stub, and the stub is weathered to the same colour as the rest, which means it broke a very long time ago. Your fir cone has had its head off since before your father was born." He looked at her. "You have examined the gate piers." "I look at everything, Your Grace. It is a great affliction." "On whose time?" "Mine, and I get very little of it," said Hester, "and I spend nearly all of it on your gate piers, which is my own foolishness, and I would thank you not to mention it to Mr. Vane." "Mr. Vane," said the Duke, "has taken sharp sand off the household order after 11 years and told me about it 3 separate times. He is very proud of it. He is insufferable about it." He stretched his legs down the steps. "Say it is a pineapple, then, and prove it." "I cannot prove it. Nobody can prove it. The man who cut it has been dead 140 years and he never told anybody, and that is the whole beauty of the thing." She wrung out the cloth. "But I will say this for the pineapple. In 1712, a pineapple cost more than the horse that carried it. If a man had one, he had it drawn and painted and put on his gate, so that everybody who came up his drive should know he was the kind of man who had a pineapple. Nobody in the history of the world has ever spent £4 to put a fir cone on a gate. There was a pause. That, said the Duke, is an argument from vanity. It is an argument from your family, Your Grace. He laughed properly then, out loud, once, and looked as startled by it as she was. My grandfather, he said, built 17 bays and a chapel and a terrace, and he had 400 yards of ha-ha dug so that his sheep should not be visible from the drawing room, and when he died, his own dogs did not know him. Vanity is the beam of this house. It is holding the roof on. Then it is a pineapple. It is a fir cone, and I am the Duke of Camber. You may be the Duke of Camber on the gravel, said Hester, and welcome. On the step you are a man sitting where I have to wash. He moved his boots. He did not go. They argued about it for a good half-hour, which was time neither of them had, and got no nearer, and were never afterwards any nearer, and it became the running joke of the rest of their lives. And years later, at a christening, an aunt of his was heard to say that she had never in her life met two people so determined to be wrong on such a small subject. That was the Thursday. On the Friday, Sarah Pyle came and stood in the laundry door with her arms folded and her face gone red. You did my floor. I did 3 flags of it. You did it Tuesday night when I was up at my mother's, and you never said. And Nat says you had them up with a bar and you were at it till gone 11. They rocked, said Hester. Every time you stood on the middle one, you got the slop over your feet. They rocked because they were bedded on sand, and the sand had washed out from under them these 20 years, and there was nothing wrong with the flags at all. 20 year, said Sarah. I lifted them, and I made a bed of lime and sand, 1 to 3, and I laid them back on it, and beat them down with the handle of a maul, and blinded the joints. Hester looked up. It is an hour's work. It is not a kindness. It is an hour's work that nobody had done. I have stood on that floor since I was 19 years of age, said Sarah Pyle, and her chin went, and she got hold of it. My feet have been wet since I was 19 years of age, and I have said it to Mr. Vane, and I have said it to the old Duke's man, and I said it once to a bishop, and every one of them told me a laundry is a wet place. A laundry is a wet place, said Hester. A floor is not. Sarah Pyle stood there with her arms folded for a while longer. Then she said, There is a copper of hot on Sunday nights now, and nobody using it after 8, and turned round and went back to her tubs, and that was as near as she ever came to saying thank you, and both of them knew exactly what it was. The Duke saw 2 things that week that he was not meant to see. He saw her take the other end of a hamper off Sarah Pyle at the turn of the back stairs without a word being said by either of them, and go down 2 flights with it and go straight back up to her own work, and there was nobody in the passage at all. And on the Sunday he saw her in the mason's yard with Kerry sitting on the bench in the sun, listening to the story about cutting the terrace coping at 19, which he knew because he had heard it 50 times as a boy. And he stood behind the stable arch and heard her ask a question in the middle of it that made the old man tell the whole thing over again from the start. It went into him and stuck there, and would not come out. He had spent 4 years arranging his life so that nothing should be asked of him. And here was a woman on £8 a year giving away an hour of her one free day to hear a story twice. He went in and sat in the library and could not read. The lime came up from the kiln at Paddon on the 22nd of August, 30 bushels of it in lump, and Rose men stacked it in the old coach house against the end wall where the seasoned oak was, and the dressed stone for the chapel arch, and they put a tarpaulin over it, and went home. It had not rained for 6 weeks. It rained that night, and it came with a wind out of the southwest that got under the tarpaulin at about 11 and took it off the heap like a sheet off a bed. Hester woke at 1 with the rain going across her attic window and lay there for the space of perhaps 10 heartbeats before she was out of bed and pulling her dress over her shift because she had grown up 200 yards from a lime kiln and she knew what was standing in that coach house. Quicklime is not a stone and it is not a powder. It is a thing waiting. Water is what it wants, and when the water comes, it takes it with a violence that has nothing to do with fire and makes more heat than any fire in the house, and it swells and splits and steams and cracks itself apart, and anything dry standing against it will char and then take light. She came out of the north door barefoot with her boots in her hand, and the yard was already glowing. The Duke was there before her, in shirt-sleeves, with the coach-house doors dragged back and steam and smoke rolling out over him in the rain, and he had a bucket in his hand. "Put it down!" she shouted. He turned. "Put the water down! Water is what is burning it!" She got hold of the bucket herself and swung it away into the mud. Every drop you throw on that heap makes it hotter. Sand, dry earth. There is a sand heap by the mixing floor. We smother it and we drag it thin, and the timber comes out first. He did not argue, and he did not ask her a single question. In all the years afterwards, she thought better of him for that half-second than for anything else he ever did. They got the horses out of the 2 stalls at the end first, and then the timber, and the timber was the labour of the night. Oak in lengths of 14 feet. Seasoned 8 years, and each length wanted 2 people, and there were only ever 2 people, until Nat Sherborne came at 2:30 and Kerry after him, walking up from the village in the rain in his nightshirt and coat with his ruined hands hanging. "Spread it!" Hester kept shouting. "Do not heap it. Spread it thin as you can lay it. It cannot hold the heat if it is thin." The heap steamed like a fen at sunrise. The lumps cracked with a sound like knuckles going, dozens of them, hundreds, and the whole shed smelt of hot stone and scald, and the heat came off it in a wall you had to turn your face out of. They dug sand from the mixing floor and threw it and shovelled and dragged, and twice the Duke of Camber went down on his knees in the muck when a length of oak came off his shoulder wrong and got up and took it again. At 4 o'clock, with the worst of it out and the rain easing, he stood in the yard with his hands on his thighs, and she saw that he had put the great bulks of oak up on trestles clear of the wet ground, and had chalked and levelled them by eye, and had done it in the middle of everything without appearing to think about it. "Who taught you that?" "Kerry did," he said, "when I was 9. I was in this yard every day of the year until I was sent to school. He let me make the centering for the ice-house arch. It stood too." "It would," said Kerry from the wall, where he was sitting because his hands had gone. Her wrists had gone up in white blisters, and she had not felt it. The Duke made her sit on the trestle, and he tore his own shirt sleeve off at the shoulder, and soaked it in the butt, and bound it round her forearm, and neither of them said anything for the length of time it takes to wind a wet cloth 4 times round and knot it. "It burns from the inside," she said at last. "It is not the fire. It is the lime taking the water out of a person the same way it takes it out of the air. You knew what it would do," he said, "before you were out of the house." "I was raised beside a kiln, Your Grace." "You were raised beside a kiln," he repeated, and looked at her wrist and not at her face, and let go of her arm, and there was nothing said after that, and nothing needed to be. It got light. The yard was black and grey and steaming, and the rain stopped altogether, and away over the park the sun came up on a house that had not lost anything at all. Wherever this finds you tonight, is it raining where you are, or has the sky been kind? There is nothing left burning in that yard now, and the worst of it is out. Stay where you are, and let the rest come. He took her up to the quarry on the 1st of September at 6 in the morning on the pretence of nothing at all. It was 3/4 of a mile up the north track, and the willow herb was over the road, and at the top there was a face of rock 40 feet high with the marks of the pick still on it, and a green pool in the bottom and a wren going about in the brambles. "There," said Hester, "there is your house. I have not been up here since I was a boy." That band there, the one with the shadow under it, that is the 11-inch bed, and that is the whole of Camber Hall. Every plinth, every quoin, every stair, and the coping on your terrace. 11 inches is a strange thickness for a bed, and there is not another like it in this county, which is why the house looks the way it does and nothing else does. She put her hand on the face, and it comes out of the hill wet. There is water in a stone in the ground, and a mason calls it the sap. You cut it green when it is soft enough to work like cheese, and you set it before the sap is out of it, and then it dries in the wall and skins over hard. And it is that skin that keeps the weather out for 400 years. Skin it after, with a file or a scouring brush, and you have taken off the only armour it will ever have. And that is why you would not have the sand. That is why I would not have the sand, Your Grace. He sat down on a block that had been squared and left 40 years ago by a man who had gone home to his dinner and never come back for it. Say the rest of it, he said. I have not got a rest of it. You have had a rest of it since April, said the Duke of Camber, and you look at the south front of my house the way a doctor looks at somebody's mother. She stood with her hand on the wet rock, and for one whole minute she was very near to saying all of it. Not yet, she said. Why not? Because when I say it, Your Grace, you will have to do something. And there is one thing in it that I would rather tell you when there is nobody in the yard. He looked at her for a long moment. Then I shall wait, he said, and be told, and they walked back down the track without another word about it, and a wren went along the hedge beside them the whole way, and it was, of all the mornings of that year, the one she kept. Mr. Ansel Rowe came to find her on the 2nd of September in the mason's yard in the middle of the afternoon. He was a well-made man of 50 with a good coat and a manner that had got him past a great many people, and he had been clerk of the works at Camber Hall for 12 years, and had built the school at Marlton and repaired 2 churches, and could talk about drainage for an hour and be listened to. Miss Reed, Mr. Rowe, you have been up at the Kelsey Quarry. He said it pleasantly. Nat Sherborne saw you on the track, and you were on the scaffold at the Fourth Bay on Sunday, which is a very odd place for a housemaid on her afternoon. It is. And there is a yard of pointing raked out of the joint at the Fourth Bay that was sound on Saturday. Hester put down the rule she had been holding. There is, she said. I raked it out with a hook. It went in half an inch and stopped dead on a plate of Roman cement, and behind the cement the stone was so soft you could take it up with a spoon. It has been wet in there since the spring, and it cannot get out. You will put it back? No. Rose smiled and came a step nearer and lowered his voice into the register of a man doing somebody a service. Let me be of use to you, he said. You are a clever woman, and clever women in service go one of 2 ways, and I have seen a great deal of both. There is a place at Marlton for a housekeeper at £22, and I have the giving of it. You would be your own mistress. You would never kneel on a stone again as long as you lived. And you would be 12 miles away, said Rowe, which would suit us both. It would suit one of us. Miss Reed. He let a little of it show at last. Not much, just enough. I have been 12 years in this house. I have had a duke's confidence for 4 of them, and I have had it because I do not trouble him. Do you understand what that is worth? He does not want to know what is in his own walls. He has told me so in this yard, in those words, and you propose to walk up to that man with a lump of rotten stone in your apron. I propose to tell him the truth. You propose to tell him, said Rowe, that the balustrade that killed Henry Ferrers was face-bedded from the day it was set, and that the same has been done again under his own hand, on his own front, at his own expense, and signed for by him personally at the audit of every quarter since March 12th. You may find that a harder sentence to say than to think. He straightened his cuff. And you will say it as who, exactly? As his housemaid. As Jonas Varell's daughter, said Mr. Rowe. The wasps went on at the water butt. Somewhere out beyond the arch a horse shifted in the yard. "I knew your father a little," he went on, and his voice was almost gentle. "Everybody in the trade knew him after the wire. 4 men in the water and a coroner's court and a name that no builder in this county would put on a contract afterwards, and he died the following winter, and you have been calling yourself Reed for something over 3 years. Now, if you go to the Duke of Camber, what he will hear from me at 9 o'clock the next morning is that there is a woman under a false name in his house who has cut a hole in his south front, and whose father brought down a bridge, and who has an interest in every stone that goes into this place being called rotten, and you will not be able to say one word of it is untrue, because it is all true. That is the trouble with the truth, Miss Reed. There is generally enough of it lying about for anybody." He put on his hat and adjusted it and went as far as the arch and turned round. £22, he said. "It is a good house and there is a garden to it. Think it over until Michaelmas." She was 3 weeks in the house after that, and every one of those days he was courteous to her in front of other people. And once, at the audit table with the Duke and Mr. Vane in the room, he asked her very kindly whether her hands were mending, and said that a woman who ran into a lime fire barefoot had more heart than sense, and everybody laughed, and it was done so lightly that she could not have said afterwards what it was that had been taken from her. She found the scaffold still standing at the 4th Bay on the 8th of September, when Rowe's men had struck the rest of it and carted it. Nobody could say who had given the order. And on the 14th, she came into the yard and found that the old lime pit by the shed had been dug out and lined and filled, and 30 bushels of fresh lime run to putty in it and covered with 3 inches of water to lie there and fatten through the autumn, because she had said once, on a step in August, in the middle of a sentence about something else, that a mortar is never worth anything until the putty has lain a season under water. She stood and looked at it for a long time. Then she put the boards back over it and went in and said nothing, because he had said nothing, and that was the whole of what was between them, and it was not to be spoiled by either of them speaking. It rained on the 25th of September, warm rain, the first real rain since August, and Hester went out at 11 at night and stood on the terrace in it because she could not stay in her bed. The house had 200 years of water running off it in the dark, out of the hopper heads and down the full pipes and along the gravel, and she stood at the 4th Bay with her hand on the wall and understood, all at once and without warning, what had been happening to her since April. She had not the smallest doubt about what he felt. That was the cruelty of it. He liked her. He came and sat on his own step at 6 in the morning to argue about a fir cone. He had lain awake and had a lime pit dug because of one sentence she had spoken and forgotten. And she knew exactly what all of it was, because she had been taught arithmetic and she was not a fool. It was a debt. A man had written to him twice and he had not gone, and a man had died on this terrace. And ever since, this house had been full of things he could not repair, and one woman who repaired them, and he had fastened onto her the way a drowning man fastens onto a post. That was not love. That was a man paying in the only currency he had left to somebody who would take it, and under that there was the plain accounting which she made herself do standing there in the rain. £6,000 of stone wanted on the south front alone, a dukedom, a name, 4 trustees and a marriage in Dorset. A woman in the servants' hall at £8 a year with lime scars on her wrists and a false name, and a father the county had hanged in every way but the actual rope. She said it out loud once into the rain, because things said out loud are harder to argue with afterwards. He will marry in Dorset, and he will keep me on to look after the stone, and I will say yes, and I will be here at 60, and that is the whole of it. She stood with that for a while. She did not cry and she did not decide anything, and nobody came. After perhaps a quarter of an hour, she found that her hand had gone cold on the wall, and she took it off and thought that the joint at the fourth bay ought to be pointed before the frosts, whatever else happened, and went in by the north door and slept for 4 hours and got up at 5 and did the step. Michaelmas Eve was the 28th, and the audit dinner was in the great hall, with the tenants in and the trustees down from London, and 11 candles on the table and the quarter's papers stacked at the Duke's elbow. She was not in the hall. She was in the passage outside with a tray, which is how she came to hear Mr. Rowe say her name. He did it beautifully. He did it as a man performing a painful duty. He said that he had held his tongue for 3 weeks and could hold it no longer with the quarter's accounts on the table. He said that there was a woman in the household who had come in under the name of Reed, who was in fact the daughter of Jonas Verrill of the Wire Bridge, that she had been on the scaffold, that she had cut a yard of sound pointing out of the south front with her own hands and left the wall open to this week's rain, and that in his judgment, which he gave with great reluctance, she had been put there. The tray went down on the passage table with a noise that stopped everything, and Hester walked into the hall. "I am Jonas Verrill's daughter," she said. "The rest of it, Mr. Rowe, you and I will settle in the morning, in the daylight, in front of these same gentlemen, and I will want 2 pails of water." And she looked once down the length of that table at the Duke of Camber. He said nothing at all. He sat with his hand flat on the quarter's papers, and his face like the front of his own house, and he said nothing, and the trustee in the grey coat said that the woman should be put out of the house tonight, and the Duke said, in a voice she had not heard from him before, "In the morning." And that was all he said. She slept in the mason's yard shed with the door open on Kerry's old bench, and she was not put out, and nobody came. At 9 in the morning on Michaelmas Day, the hall was fuller than it had been at dinner, because word had gone round the estate in the way that word does, and there were tenants standing along the panelling who had no business there at all. Hester came in at the far door in her working dress with her sleeves turned back. "I will say my own part first," she said, "because it comes first." The room went quiet the way a room does when it discovers that the person speaking is not going to raise her voice. "My name is Hester Verrill. I gave the name Reed in April, and I have answered to it every day since, and I did that because no house in this county would take a Verrill after the Wire Bridge, and I wanted my dinner. That is the whole reason, and it is not a good one. In my first week here, I stood under the scaffold on the south front, and I saw that the stone in the plinth was face-bedded and that the joints were being pointed in Roman cement. I knew what both of those things meant. My father taught me before I was 12. I said nothing in April, I said nothing in May. In June, Mr. Kerry, who had said the same thing out loud 3 times, was turned off this estate as an old man who could not see his work. I was in the passage when it was said. I had the whole of it in my mouth and I swallowed it, because to open it I should have had to say my father's name in front of Mr. Rowe, and I was afraid. Edmund Kerry lost his place, and his trade, and his cottage by Michaelmas, and he is 61. And there is no undoing any of that. It was not Mr. Rowe who kept quiet for 3 months. It was me. That is mine, and I am not going to be talked out of it, and nobody in this room is to say a word to make it easier. Now come out to the front step." They went out. It is one of the strangest sights that house has ever seen. 4 trustees, a duke, a steward, 30 tenants, and the whole kitchen standing on the gravel in the September sun, and one woman kneeling on the top step with 2 pails. "Mr. Rowe's bill for the quarter to June," she said. 412 feet superficial of Kelsey ashlar. His Grace signed it. Mr. Vane has it in his hand. This is Kelsey stone. She threw the first pail across the top step, and the water ran, and the stone came up warm gold with the wet on it. "Come close, all of you. Those are shells. Every one of them a little creature that died in a sea before there was a hill here. There is no other stone within 20 miles with those in it, and you will find them on the terrace coping and on the chapel plinth and on the stone over the old Duke in the chapel. This is the new plinth that was set last October and billed as the same. She threw the second pail against the wall 2 feet away, and the stone went a dull grey-green like a slate, and there was a sound along the gravel that was 30 people breathing in. No shells. It is not Kelsey. It is Slade pit stone from 12 miles off, and it is bought at about 1/3 the price, and it is standing on its edge. She put her thumbnail under the face of the new block and lifted, and a flake came away the size of her hand, curved like a scale, and under it the stone was dark and damp. That is 1 summer. Kelsey stone laid on its bed loses 1/4 of an inch in 130 years. This has lost that in 10 months, and it will come off the wall in sheets, and the reason it is on its edge is that Slade beds are 6 inches deep, and this course wanted 11, and the only way to make a shallow stone look deep is to turn it up, and it is pointed in cement so that nobody can see the beds and no water can ever get out again. She stood up and wiped her hands on her apron. "There is the whole of it," she said. "The house has been paid for twice and built once, and it was built out of the wrong hill." Roe's voice, when it came, was as reasonable as it had ever been. He spoke for perhaps a minute and a half about the difficulty of getting stone in a wet season, and the closure of the Kelsey working on grounds of safety, which he had reported at the time, and the substitution of an equivalent bed, and then he said, "And I would remind the gentleman that this is a woman with a name and an interest of her own," and stopped in the middle of the sentence, because Edmund Kerry had come out from behind the tenants and was standing on the gravel with his hat in his 2 dead hands. "I told him in March," said Kerry, "in the yard by the banker. I told him the plinth was face-bedded, and I told him twice more in April with his own men standing by, and he turned me off in June and had it put about that I could not see my work. Mr. Kerry, and then I said nothing neither," said Kerry, over him, to the trustees, to the whole gravel. 3 months. I sat in my sister's kitchen, and I drank, and I let it be said of me that I was past it, because I could not bear to go up to that door and be looked at. So there is 2 of us stood here that kept quiet, and only one of us has said so, and she is younger than my own girl. Roe tried once more. He turned to the Duke, and he said, "Your Grace, 12 years." And it was the appeal of a man reaching for a rail that has been taken away, and it landed on nothing whatever. Nobody moved. The Duke looked at him and did not answer, and Roe understood, in that moment, in front of 30 people, that the room had decided before he ever opened his mouth. He did not shout. He took his hat off, which nobody had asked him to do, and stood holding it and got smaller, and the whole plausible weight of him went out like water out of sand. Hester had at that moment one more thing she could have said. She had had it for 3 weeks. There was a second Slade delivery in July that had never been entered anywhere at all, and a bill of it in Roe's own hand that Nat Sherborne had carried, and if she had said it on that gravel, there would have been a constable at Marlton by dinner-time, and an assize after Christmas, and she would have been believed. She looked at him standing there with his hat in his hands. "You knew the beds were wrong," she said. "A man who knows that much knows enough to be honest somewhere else. Go and be it." The house was quiet by 4 in the afternoon. Hester was in the laundry, of all places, folding her own 2 dresses into the canvas bundle she had come with, and Sarah Pyle was standing against the copper with her arms folded, and the last of the sun was coming through the high window in a bar full of steam. "You are never going." "I gave a false name in this house for 6 months, Sarah, and I did it in front of 4 trustees this morning." "You saved his front." "That is not the same account," said Hester. "There are 2 accounts, and they do not settle each other, and Kerry is 61 and has 3 months of his life he will not get back, and every day I stop here I am a person he has to be pleasant to." Sarah said something rude about the trustees. "It is not them," said Hester. She sat down on the bench with the dress in her lap and looked at the flags she had lifted in August. It is that I have spent my whole life on the wrong side of it. My father used to say, and she stopped and started again because it was worth saying properly. He used to say that nothing stands by being hard. It stands because something in it was let go soft. The joint is put in to give way. It takes the frost and the wet and the moving, and it goes to nothing over 50 years, and the stone comes through untouched. That is the whole trade, and I have spent 4 years being hard, Sarah. I made myself the stone. I would not give an inch anywhere, not a name, not a word out of season, and there is a man of 61 in a lean-to at Malton who took the whole of the frost for me. And what will you do? There is a church at Wickenby wanting its tower repointed, and they cannot get a man before the spring, said Hester. I can point a wall as well as anybody living. I shall be gone by Thursday. She was not gone by Thursday. He came and found her at 8 the next morning on the front step, with the 4 carriages on the gravel, and the trustees going and the household drawn up in the doorway to see them off. My father told me I might marry whoever I liked, he said. He said it in front of you. You wrote it down. He was very ill, Your Grace. He was perfectly clear. He came down 1 step. Hester, he said, and stopped, having got no further than her name. Then he turned round and said it to the gravel, to the coats and the carriages and the whole staring front of his own house. Mr. Rowe stood up in my hall on Sunday night and said this woman's father brought down a bridge, and I sat there with my hand on the papers, and I said nothing. For 1 hour, in front of everybody, I did nothing at all. And then I went upstairs and did nothing all night, and she slept in a shed in my own yard. I have done that before. I did it for 6 weeks once, with a letter on my table, and a man I loved died on that terrace behind you waiting for me to come and look at a thing he had told me twice about. I am very good at not going. It is the only thing I do well. He stopped and started again, worse. I am not asking because of the stone. I want that said because she will think it, and she will be wrong, and there is no way on earth for me to prove it. I am asking because in 20 years there has not been 1 hour in this house I would have chosen to have over again, and this year there have been about 400, and every one of them had her in it. Marry me, said the Duke of Camber. I have nothing else to say. I have been saying it badly for a month by leaving things in the yard. He got down on the gravel, which was wet, in front of the carriages, and it was not graceful. Hester Verrill put down the brush. They were married at the chapel with the slipped voussoir over the door in the 2nd week of November, and Edmund Carey cut the new stone for that arch himself, badly over 11 days, with hands that had to be warmed at a brazier every hour. And he was master mason at Camberhall for 6 years after it, and taught 2 apprentices, and was buried out of the chapel he had mended, and there is a piece of Kelsey stone over him. The Kelsey quarry was opened in the spring, and the south front came down, course by course, over 4 years, and went back up on its natural bed, in lime, and it is standing yet. Mr. Vane ordered no sharp sand for the rest of his life, and mentioned this, on average, twice a year. Ansell Rowe went to Bristol and worked on the docks as a measuring clerk, and was, by every account, extremely accurate. And when a letter came from him after 2 years asking for a character, one was written, and it was true, and it was not generous, and it was enough. Sarah Pyle's floor never rocked again. And on a morning in the following June, a new man in the house came out with a pail and a paper of sharp sand to do the front steps, and was stopped in the doorway by the Duke of Camber himself. "Water," he said, "and a bristle brush. Nothing else on that step. That is her standing order, and it has outlasted 3 of my trustees." And the Duchess, who was on her knees on the top stair at the time with her sleeves turned back, and no intention whatever of getting up, said that it was a pineapple, and he said that it was a fir cone, and they went at it there in the doorway with the water running down the steps and the shells coming up gold in the stone, hundreds of them lying all through it like seed in a loaf. Is there a step in your own house worn hollow by the feet of people you would give a great deal to hear coming up it again? Sit with that a while tonight, and then come back, and we will find another door and see who is kneeling at it.